Sarah, how's it going?
Going well. How are you?
Doing all right. So, I wanted to have you on to talk about you and your life and all that good stuff. Trained as an MMA fighter for a little bit.
I was very active in mixed martial arts.
hmm
I didn't start super early, but that was definitely my goal was like, I'm gonna fight in a cage.
Most people avoid that. So, what got you into wanting to do that?
I think that the evolution of the MMA drive in me just started like many women do, probably as self-defense. You know,
hmm
you're young. I started when I was about 14 years old. And then I was in an accident, which I write about in my book. I was in a really dramatic accident where I almost died. I broke my back. And rather than going to therapy, physical or occupational therapy, they just kind of had like oh, the breaks weren't that bad. And you're in karate and you do stretching and this kind of repetitive motion stuff that'll be good for you. Just keep doing that. And so I stayed with karate and in that kind of Americanized taekwondo format that a lot of people do with the different belts and the
Yeah.
stripes on the belt. And you have those little milestones of achievement, which if you're not getting that in your education system or if you're not getting that elsewhere, that's really good, positive affirmation of skills that you're building. And I felt I was getting stronger. And then we got to the point in karate where they because a lot of times with Americanized taekwondo, it's very performative, right? It's like, I'm gonna do these motions and I'm gonna just and then you go to competitions and you're like, you're never gonna fight anybody with this. Like you're gonna get beat up acting like this, right? And you're doing your little act with your bow staff and stuff. And I'm like, that's cool. And it does take skill, but it didn't really feel practical to me. And I got to the level where I think I was about to be a brown belt. I think I got to purple, and then it was gonna get into brown and black and all those more advanced belts, and they wanted to start, like, jumping and spinning and kicking, and I'm like, "Now you really lost me." Like, now you're getting into that you're never gonna whip this out in a street fight. It's never gonna be the most practical thing that suddenly I'm tornado kicking or anything like that, and I said, "Rather than jumping up and kicking, I'm gonna go to the ground." And that's where I went from karate to jujitsu. So I actually started with the base of taekwondo, karate, and then moved into mixed jujitsu. And then jujitsu felt good for me as a woman too because I was a bit activisty, you could say. I went to train and there were women's classes and men's classes, and I walked in and I said, "I'm not taking your women's class." I'm like,
Mm.
"I'm just not gonna take your women's class." And they're like, "What? Why would you?" And I'm like, "Well, if I'm taking this as self-defense, I'm not defending myself as against a 130, 140-pound woman. I wanna feel what it feels like if I'm gonna grapple and protect myself and get away from somebody trying to pin me down or choke me or something. I wanna know what that feels like against a 250-pound guy, with different muscles and different all that stuff." And everybody has different comfort levels with that. And so the place that I went to was actually very open-minded with my take on that, I'm like, "I'm not taking your women's class. I wanna take it for real. I wanna roll with the guys." And there were some men who were just like, "I don't wanna get that close to you. I don't wanna wrestle with you. It's too close. It's too intimate. It's too, you're putting your hands in their chest and doing stuff." And, whether or not they thought that it was, like, actually intimate or they just weren't feeling the vibe, like, they just thought I wasn't serious about it was people had different preferences, but some people took it seriously and trained with me, and, I'm grateful for that because that was the whole point. So they instead of calling it the men's and the women's, they called it the women's and the co-ed class because of me. And so I felt like, "Oh, look at I'm doing my little part to, like, make it a blended class," because it felt more practical to me. It felt more of, like, the outcome I really wanted to achieve.
I'm a black belt in Taekwondo. I did it when I was like 17, right? And so all that, I get where you're coming from with all that jumping, kicking stuff. It's like it's the most impractical thing, but it was fun to do, right? And
Yeah.
it gives you a baseline of self defense. But like what you're doing, like that was a very practical way of doing it to get an attacker can be any size, any sex, and usually it's going to be some jackass, and you're going to want to be able to have tested yourself against someone bigger than you is probably the best way to go about it. Did you ever like actively fight? Like, did you train and fight?
So where I had gotten to, I had just gone through karate in Minnesota, and then
Mm,
I'd moved to Colorado, and I think I'd done a little bit of the basics of jiu-jitsu in Minnesota before I moved out for college to Colorado. And then in Denver, I was actually out at a Gracie gym, and the Gracie
mm.
family is like the pinnacle of jiu-jitsu, like the origin of it and everything. So I ended up at a Gracie gym out in Denver, and it wasn't until I finished my undergraduate and ended up in Miami for graduate school that I found. It was called Freestyle Fighting Academy down in Miami, and that was really where the convergence of, like, the MMA, like, mixed martial arts, cage fighting kind of was, and I think I was just really captivated by their space. Like, they had a really cool training facility. It was really hard. I ended up getting injured is where I'm
Mhm,
getting to with this.
mhm,
And so I thought that getting to this fighting academy and taking the foundations that I learned in these early styles, the karate and the jujitsu, that this is where I'm bringing it all together. It brings in more wrestling, which I kind of learned because my older brother was a wrestler, and so we would practice, and he was like a state champ wrestler, so I was like his practice dummy for a long time because we were only 3 years apart. And he was a triathlete, so I always kinda looked up to him of, like, I wanna be like Jake, and then so I thought I'm in this fighting academy, and that's when we started bringing in more wrestling. We would have people from that place who would go to Thailand and learn these skills and then bring them back and then teach a seminar of, like, "Here's what I just learned from my month in Thailand," and that's when I started Muay Thai. And I what I didn't realize throughout all these martial arts experiences is if you don't learn the right skills about your body, then you're not building your body in the right way. So I was totally ignoring my core, which ironically from the back injury and from all these other things, that's what I should have focused on more than anything that no OT or PT person told me was all I was focusing on was having strong arms and legs. So from the kicking and the punching and the choking and the leg locks and arm locks and shrimping and all this stuff, all the skills I was learning, I could kind of ignore my core a little bit, and I could just rely on having strong arms and legs until I got to Muay Thai. And Muay Thai was where all of the holes in the ship just, like,
mhm.
exploded out, and it became very apparent that I didn't have the foundation to support that kind of training, and I ended up herniating a disc
Yeah.
through that training, like, over the course of that because I was going so hard without core strength and without focusing on protecting and on my spine and everything. And I'll never forget the training exercise. My coach had a deck of cards,
Mhm.
and the deck of cards, I don't know which one he assigned, he just kinda made it up or whatever, so if you pulled a red card, it was your right leg, and if it was a black card, it was your left leg, and he just stood there in the ring, so it was actually like a boxing ring that I'm in, and it's just me and him training, and he has a deck of cards, and as he flips a card, he goes, "5 of hearts," and I have to do 5 kicks with my right leg because it was a red, and,
Wow.
so he's just sitting there with a deck of cards, and that's how and you're doing these kicks, and it wrecked me, like, beyond being a good workout, I feel like that's where my disc herniated, and I was just like something popped, and I just knew, and I fell to the floor, and I was like, "I think this is the end of my career. I don't think I'm fit. I don't think I'm, like,
Mm,
actually cut out for this." But I feel like it was in that path where I was at those times, I was also battling a lot of addiction. I
mm,
was bottling up a lot of emotions and kind of relying on alcohol as an outlet and, just masking a lot of things as a lot of people do. And you're going through college and you're going through transformations and who am I and what's my purpose in life? And you're going through all this not knowing. And I felt like doing this strong hobby, having this fighting outlet, not only was it an outlet for some of those big emotions, whether it was anger, grief, frustration, inadequacy, abandonment, any of those
uh-huh.
big things that you struggle with. I thought that was a healthy outlet for it, but then when it went away and I could no longer do it and I got injured, then I feel like that shift kind of went even more into the substance abuse and into the, well, I don't have this to let my emotions out in,
Mhm.
so they're going to come out in another way.
This is why physical activity is such an important part of as a human. Like, you see people that are 300, 400 pounds. It's like, what they're doing to themselves in the long run is not good. I mean, it's not good for your cardiovascular system, it's not good for your joints, it's not good for anything to be that big. We have dopamine sensors in our stomach, right? And well, that's why you get that pleasure from food. Like, when you have a satisfying meal, you're happy because so that's why when we do gastric bypass surgery, we kind of remove that portion of the stomach. So you don't get that hit from, you just, it's for sustenance by that point. So when you didn't have the physicality to wear you out, you chose to drink alcohol instead, or were you were kind of doing both side by side? Is that how that went? Or
Yeah, I feel like in my early years, I do feel like I think I went real big real fast is where I'm getting to, right? Because in my early experiences, I was definitely underage drinking. It's
yeah,
not like I waited till I was 21 and now the floodgates opened. I had experiences as early as like 15 that I was drinking
hmm,
alcohol.
yeah,
And that's really common in the Midwest that I've
mhm,
seen. It's just
yeah,
really common that you grow up and it's like, hey, it's beer at a house party or you're taking a couple shots with some friends. And when I meet people who have, like, less traumatized lives than me, and they're
mm,
like, "You did what?" And
right,
it just kind of blows their mind. I'm like, "But in Minnesota and in Wisconsin, like, these don't feel like, gasp, like, clutch my pearls kind of activities. It's just
Mhm.
like, yeah, I drank at a house party. That to me, what I always say is that alcohol was my gateway drug because there was things that I did after drinking that I would never have done sober, and I was really frustrated by those decisions, and that's by the time I mean, I was only 27 when I quit drinking. So
Yeah.
I'm celebrating over 8 years of sobriety now, which I'm very proud of, but that's a young age to make that kind of big change. And for you to say, "There's this major thing I don't want in my life anymore, I don't need in my life anymore," and I kinda got it, I did
Mhm.
enough of it, I started young, I did a lot, it kind of went side by side and hand in hand with the lifestyle I was living, because I was in college.
Right.
So if I was drinking a bottle of wine and doing art in the evening, it was just, I could be at a rager, I could be at a college party, I could be at something else. And it's like, to me, this seems like a more responsible way to drink, but I was still drinking like a bottle of wine to myself a night. So it was still alcoholism.
Was a heavy social drinker. So when I would go out to dinner, I'd have a bourbon or a old fashioned or whatever. It was her birthday. I had 2 beers. I felt good. I'm like, I'm done. And then we had food and everything was great. Because alcohol is a social lubricant, lets you talk to people you wouldn't normally talk to or whatever. But this might be an odd take, but as I've gotten older, the more I've like tried to drink bourbon, I fucking hate it
Mm-mm.
because it's like, oh, it's so good. No, it tastes like death in a glass. It is
Right.
literally terrible. Like, I have never like then I've tried different types, like Woodford and all that, and I'm like, "This is not fun," so I'm not doing it anymore.
No. Yeah,
But
there
yeah.
was sometimes I really do appreciate, especially being this sober or like sober for this amount of time, there are a lot of new NA options out there, which I really appreciate. Because back in the day, we all know it was like O'Doul's and that was it. There was like
Mhm.
one option, it's O'Doul's, and there's a red one and a green one. That's all you know.
Yeah.
And I wasn't necessarily that big of a beer person even when I was drinking. Beer was not my drink of choice.
Mhm.
And so for me to explore out and see what other options are out there, there will be these NA spirits where it'll be like alcohol removed tequila or alcohol removed vodka or whatever. And there is just something about that that I have no interest in.
Yeah.
Like maybe I'll try like the THC drink or maybe I'll try like, some other CBD infused something. But when it comes to those like, I think what the purpose of those is for, like, pregnant women who really love their margaritas or something, or who really love their, sangrias or something. I don't really know, but it's like they really do want the flavor, they just don't want the alcohol.
Yeah.
But to me, which is the perspective of somebody who has a traumatic experience with alcohol, not everybody does.
Mhm.
Some people's take on it is I just don't like the taste of it, or I don't like the way it makes me feel, or I'm kind of allergic to it. And when I drink it, it like makes my face all hot and my ears get weird. Like people have all different takes. Excuse me.
No worries.
But for me, when it comes to drinking alcohol that tastes like the alcohol used to, that
Mhm.
is I don't want that reminder. So I was at, I think it was Total Wine or ABC, one of those liquor stores, and I'm always trying to tinker around and like try what do they call it? Like a Famosa, where it's a
Mhm.
fake mimosa where you try, like I'll try the fruity ones because they're less triggering. But I tried one that was like a bourbon flavored and it was like on the label, it was like smoky notes of whatever, whatever. And I tried it and I took a sip and I was like, I don't think I can drink this. And I tried one sip and I gave it to my fiance. I was like, I can't do this. And bless his heart, it was super cute because he tried to like coach me into being okay drinking it. He's like, you're not cheating on your streak. You didn't fail. And I was like, it's so cute that you think I failed.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think that I drank. I think
Right.
I'm gonna throw up because
Right.
I'm remembering all the other times I threw up after drinking this shit. Like, that's what I was thinking. Like, it was too close to the real thing.
It's a terrible reminder of what happened, and I just stay away from it anymore. When I was going through my first divorce, I was drinking a lot. I was like right of the top of going down to being alcoholic. And I said, I've said it before on the show, the only person I was hurting was me. It doesn't hurt her that I'm drunk, throwing up. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. Now that I have my girlfriend, we have a good life together. I want to be here. I don't want to be sick. What was your breaking point with alcohol?
Well, I feel like I mentioned it when I said I considered alcohol to be this gateway drug. And I feel like I've always been a very introspective person. I think I started reading self-help books when I was like 13 years old and professional development books. So I was always very just self-aware,
Mhm.
right? And so whenever something would happen in my life, I would always try and dissect it. But I think I was just smart enough to be manipulative, right? Where I was
Right.
like, I was knowing what I was doing so that I could then justify it. And I could say, well, yeah, I'm drinking all of this stuff, but I would either then compare and it's either I'm not as bad as so and so, or I would justify, well, drinking a bottle of wine in my house isn't the same as going to a rager or a college party and drinking. And so I would always find a way to finesse and kind of like put that creative PR spin on what I was
Mhm.
doing and being
Mm.
like, "But, it's not hurting anyone or it's not as bad as it could be, and I'm still getting a master's degree, I'm still buying a house, I'm still achieving all these big life milestones that people wish they could achieve, so am I really doing all that bad?" I was really, kind of fluffing myself up with it and gassing myself up with it, and I've talked about this on other podcasts too, so I'm not ashamed of it, but I was in a bad relationship. And kind of similar to your experiences, right? I looked around and I was like, I just can't do this anymore. I'm so fiercely loyal, and when I do something,
Mhm.
it is all or nothing. I'm
Mhm.
so freaking committed that when I was in this relationship, I was too proud to admit that it was not right because I had put all my eggs into this basket. I was like, this is the person for me. And I've often shared it too that it was extra complicated because he had kids, that it was just another layer of me feeling this intrinsic desire to prove myself that I was going to be a good role model for those women, those young girls. I was going to be a good role model. I wasn't going to walk away from the relationship. I wasn't going to, I thought that staying was the right thing to do. But I was losing myself in that relationship. I didn't have a voice. I was being walked all over.
Mhm.
And I'm not trying to just shit on him the whole time because what I like to say is that I think we brought out the worst in each other. The way that we bonded was that our hurts bonded, right? So we were like the same kind of fucked up. So we were like our
Trauma
failures and our
bonded.
shortcomings and like all the flaws that we had, we were like synergetic with
Mhm.
versus people that you bond with and it's like, oh my God, our great qualities are the reason that brings us together. So I
Mhm.
I I feel like I kind of turned into a version of me that I didn't like in that relationship and he was doing things that were obviously hurtful to me. And it was just like a lot of hurt and disrespect and it was all rolled up in there, right? So we were also really big drinkers, and it felt like everything we ended up doing, it was all, "We're drinking with all these people," and then if something happened, then we'd look back on it, and everybody would just be like, "Well, people were drinking," or "This was that," and it was like this great excuse that everybody could use to not take accountability for anything in our lives, myself included. So I would be like, "Oops, it wasn't me, it was the alcohol," and I'm just like, "This is too cutesy and stupid, like, people need to be accountable whether or not you're drinking," and so it to me, I think it started maybe not as a breaking point because a lot of times you look at alcoholism and it's like the easy trope of like you lost your house, you lost your car, you lost your relationship. So I didn't necessarily lose anything yet, but I looked at my life and its trajectory and where it was heading and I was like, let me just do a social experiment. Let me just pluck this out. Let me just remove this influence and see what changes. And it was almost kind of a challenge against the guy I was dating because he was such a heavy drinker, and I'll never forget because I realized I'd written it to my friend who I was asking to, like, go to an AA meeting with, and I wrote it to him that this was my ex's response. So I went to my ex and I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna quit drinking." And his response was, "Well, that sucks because I really like drinking."
Yeah.
You asshole. There's no like, "Oh, why'd you make that choice?" Or "Is it temporary?" Or, I was like, there's no questions. It was just like,
Mhm.
"That sucks because I like alcohol." And I'm like, "Man, your priorities are so off, and they're not with me. Like, you don't care about
Mhm.
me. You don't care if I died. You don't care if anything. You're just like, well, do I still get to drink? Like, what a jerk."
Probably stems from his upbringing as well. That's just a selfish asshole, you know? I mean, if I'm being honest, like, that doesn't make any fucking sense to me. He should have been, "Good for you, and what can I do to help? And maybe we can do this together." But
Yeah.
people, and especially in this day and age, and, we all have a little bit of narcissism in us, but unfortunately, some people have more, I suppose. But so we were talking before we started recording, you said you had a couple of brushes with death. You mentioned a car accident.
Yeah. So where do I start? Where's the first one? Well, in my book, the first one that I kind of felt that I took influence from was actually when I was a
Mhm.
newborn baby. So it's not so much that I have a memory of it, it's just the fact that I had knowledge of it, which I think is a different distinction because if you had a memory of it, you could like replay it and be like, I saw myself go through this.
Mhm.
But it was weird because I grew up and I had little scar incisions down in my like hip groin area.
Mhm.
And, you're a kid, you're, in middle school and you're getting older and you're exploring your body and you're like, "Mom, what are these little scars on my body?" And she's like, "Oh, you were 2 weeks old and you had a double hernia surgery." And I'm like,
Mm.
"What? What do you mean I had a surgery when I was a baby?" And so it kind of feels like this crazy thing to hear about yourself. First of all, that you're not like you didn't grow up because it didn't influence my life. It was like, "Oh yeah, this happened. You got your surgery. You're fine." And now you're in middle school and you're asking me questions about it. So my parents didn't see it as a big deal. But as I grew up, I was like, "Oh my gosh, as a baby, I almost died." You're thinking like that's the first experience of it, which as I learned in my adult life, hernias are not necessarily inherently, like, life-threatening to babies, like, if they go untreated and if there's other things, like, sure, but, they worked quickly and they got it resolved. At the time, I first only had a single hernia, and then they scheduled it and sent me home, and I cried so hard it, like, bursted into
Wow.
a double hernia, and then they're like, "Okay, now it's an emergency surgery." So, I kinda joke that I was, like, complicated from the start, and then, when I was 15, the accident that I mentioned that kinda got me into that I was in during the martial arts training is that I was in an ATV accident. So it was kind of like my first time driving or riding, operating an ATV, and I was not that coordinated of a kid. Like I was like doing the riding lawnmower in our
Oh.
yard in Minnesota, but I wasn't like, and I had my snowmobile license, so I kind of felt like I could handle some small vehicles and stuff. I even took like the snowmobile training, so I knew how to like change the belts, and I knew how like the engine worked, and I felt, I was a tomboy. I wanted to be like my older brother with the wrestling and stuff.
Mhm.
So when I was kind of dating, and I say dating because 'cause you're like you're like 14, like, what do
Yeah.
you date? Like, so this
Right.
my boyfriend at the time, he was like, "Hey, we're gonna go ride ATVs. Do you wanna come with?" And I was like, "That sounds so fun, like, let's go." And, I had no idea what I was doing. It actually had the clutch and all that thing and the shifting, and I wasn't as familiar with it, but I was holding my own, which I also go back to think, like, why did I have my own? There were 5 of us, and there were 4 ATVs, and they had 2 guys sharing one, and then I'm on one by myself. I'm like, "Why wasn't I sharing with my boyfriend? Like, why did they put me on my own?" So I, like, hindsight is 50/50, right? So
Right.
I always go back and I'm like, "This was so stupid." And so we're riding around and it's fine for a while, and then one of the guys is like, "Let's go on this trail." But the trail was, like, recently flooded. It had a lot of
M
rain recently, and so they were just like, "Hey, be careful, there might be some soft mud, there might be some stuff to look out for on this trail." So I'm trying to, like, just hold my own and go, and at least I'm wearing a helmet, and at least I'm just, like, following them, and we get to this point where there was a tree down, so there's a log, like, across the path, we couldn't go further on the trail. And so they decide that we're all gonna go over the log and go to the other side of it so we can keep going and stuff. And they're trying to coach about the of how to get over it. And they're like, be careful because if you go too slow, you're gonna get stuck. And so my brain thinks what? Go slow, you get stuck, go fast, you get over. And I'm like watching everybody. They're going slow, they're kinda chugging it, and some people from behind, they're kinda pushing it and it gets over. And then I like gun it right into this stupid tree. And I just whack and I start flying, but I had put so much force into the ATV that it did go over. So I win, right? It did go over, but I didn't hold on. So I flew off, and so I whack against one that was already on the other side, and then mine is still coming over and then crushes me against it. So I
Jesus.
broke 4 vertebrae in, my right thoracic 2 through 5, so kind of the
Mhm.
upper
Mm.
upper vertebrae there, kind of in your middle back by your shoulder blade. But
Yeah.
again, they were just transverse process fractures. So basically your spine is like this and it's got all this transverse process off to the side. So I fractured 4 of them, but they didn't like break off that they needed to reattach them or anything. They were just fractured. So that's why the people were like, "Hey, it's not in your low back, it's in your mid back where you're going to be okay. Just go to your sports and you'll be okay." And again, very grateful that I was wearing a helmet. They told me that the fractures were an eighth of an inch from my spinal cord. So that's
Yeah.
why I call it like a brush with death because at minimum I could have been paralyzed.
From the
Like at
chest down.
minimum I just couldn't shouldn't have walked away. So you would normally think that that would make you live like maybe a more conservative, cautious life because you're like, "Oh my gosh." And no, it just like sailed me into like, let's see what else I can do and get away with. Because then you feel like a cat with 9 lives. Then you're like, well, you can't keep me down, try and catch me, death, right? And
Challenge
so
accepted.
I ended up fast forward a few years later. So that accident was when I was 15, about to be 16. It was like 2 weeks before my 16th birthday. And then the next year, just the next year when I was 17, I was in a boating accident. because again, we were not really these like extreme sport outing people with like ATVs or boats or anything. We were just around people with them. So we'd gone up to somebody's cabin, super common for people in Minnesota, go up to their cabin up north, and they had a boat. They had a boat. They were pulling the inner tube behind it. And me and a friend of mine, she was a few years younger than me. So I'm this big body on the inner tube, and she's this little body on the inner tube, right? And so the waves start getting real choppy. We can't really hold on, but all my dad, who's the spotter of the boat, who should not have been the spotter of the boat because he doesn't even swim. So they made him the spotter of the boat, and then her dad was driving, and he was supposed to be the one to like yell to the other dad of like, "Hey, stop! They're not doing okay, right?"
Right.
So it's hard to tell exactly how the memories go of if he even knew we were yelling for him to stop or whatever, all these things. But he finally tells the driver to stop, and we had hit one big last crash of a wave. And my friend Samantha, she was light. So when she bounced on that last wave, she flung off back because she's
No.
light.
Yeah.
I was holding on a little bit more, like harder than she was because I could hold on a little bit better. And when she flew off that way and we hit that last wave, I flopped forward because I'm the heavier one and her weight is now no longer on that side. So I kind of like roll over and the rope of the tube gets wrapped around my neck and the boat is still kind of going for a little bit longer. So they had like been stopping. So it's not like they rode for another mile or something
Mhm.
dragging me with them, but it was enough to kind of like
Yeah.
again, could have snapped my neck,
Yeah.
could have like very at the not much deviation could have ended very differently. And the bizarre thing about that story is when I interviewed my parents to be like, "What are your memories of this day? Like, what do you think?" And they're just like, "You like seemed fine and we had some hot dogs at the picnic table." Like nobody was like, "We need to rush you to the
Fucking
hospital to get checked out." They were just like, "You seemed like you were fine. Like,
super
what do you want from
nonchalant.
us?"
Yeah, meanwhile, it was just a scene at a Final Destination.
I know, and they're just like they just kept being like, "Well, that's Sarah, she's just gonna, like,
Yeah.
bounce back," and, like, because when I broke my back on the ATV,
Mhm.
I got back on the ATV and we rode back to my boyfriend's house, and his dad was there with his girlfriend at the time who was a nurse, but she was a respiratory nurse, so
Mm.
she didn't really know to, like, check most things, she's just like, "Well, you're breathing, so you're okay,"
Yeah.
and so I went back home from the ATV accident, and my parents were like, "Well, we know something's wrong because 'cause you're home early."
Right.
And then they took me to the emergency room and like but I was walking, I was talking, I was just like, "Oh, it feels like I need to crack my back." Like, I
Mm.
didn't I wasn't, like, d d unable to
Debilitated?
move or
Right,
anything,
yeah.
like debilitated. Yeah, it's exactly the word I was looking for. So then by the time the neck with the boating accident happened, they're just like, well, Sarah's kind of extreme and like having these things." So then a few years later, because this is my life that I'm like dodging death at every corner, a few years later, my mom got cancer. My mom got breast cancer and she beat it. So she's
Good.
okay.
Okay, good.
Spoilers.
Okay.
But,
Well, those are the good
but
kind of
then
spoilers.
I know, right? Well, because sometimes I leave it lingering and they're like, "Did her mom die?" I'm like, "Okay, let's get that." She's great. She wrote the foreword for my book, so she's wonderful. But she got cancer and we started this music festival that our family runs. So we started this nonprofit. We just celebrated our 15th year doing it. It's called Breast Fest for obvious reasons. And I think it was the first year that we were doing it. I had gone up, so I was living in Colorado in college. I'd gone up to support Breast Fest and I was borrowing my mom's car. I was going to see friends. They had a bonfire. It was late at night. So I'm probably coming back around 1:30, something like that, and I fell asleep at the wheel.
No.
And if that wasn't bad enough, because it's very dangerous, and for all your listeners, like, do not take being sleepy while you're driving. Don't take
Lightly.
it like, please take it seriously. Please know that this is a real bad thing because it can happen real fast. What made it worse and what made it the stupidest one of the stupidest decisions I think I've ever made in my life is that because I was so tired, and you know how it is sometimes when you're like, you know how close you are to home and you're like, "Oh, I'm so familiar with this road," and that's why they say that a lot of the accidents will happen within like a mile of your home because
Mhm.
you're so confident, overly confident sometimes in those areas. So this is rural Minnesota, way out in the country, straight shot. So I just made kind of like one of the last major turns and I'm like almost home, almost to their place.
Mhm.
And that road is a two-lane road, one north, one south. And then I had like maybe like one more turn and then I was at my parents' house. It was so close. And I put cruise control on going 55 miles per hour
Oh, no.
because I was tired and I didn't want to have to keep putting my foot on the gas and I was tired. And I put cruise control on going 55 miles an hour and I fell asleep at the wheel. Fell asleep with cruise control going 55 and I went like this and I drifted and I ended up I crossed the lane of traffic, so I'm going north, I cross over southbound traffic, so it's 1:30, there's no traffic, it's rural Minnesota, but I graze across, I end up in the opposite ditch, I wake up when I'm hitting trees and the side airbag is hitting me in the face. I didn't realize that because I was tired, I had the window open so the fresh air would kinda keep me awake, but my window was open as I'm hitting all these trees, so there's, like, branches and
Jeez.
brushes and the airbag and, like, stuff is just flying in. But at least I didn't break the window, right? So it's just like a lot is happening and it's commotion and it wakes me up and I bring the car back up, park it on the right side of the curb, like on my side of the shoulder, and I'm just shaken up, right? My mom's mirror of the car is ripped off, the panels are ripped off the side of the car, the front panel under is ripped off the car. It's just a little sedan Toyota. And all I can think of is how grateful I was that I drifted gradually, because if I was driving and I jerked it really fast and my hand went down quickly, I would have T-boned that tree line at 55 miles per hour. And
Mm,
if you've been in the rural areas, in those ditches, a lot of times there's electrical boxes, there's mailboxes, there's other things that I could have run into that I dodged. So that's some of the major ones.
yeah,
I think
Jesus.
those are the I'm trying to think if there was another one after the falling asleep at the wheel. I feel like those are the major ones that I experienced, and so it became kind of a again, after the boating accident, and my family was like, "Well, you seemed fine." After I totaled my mom's car, it became the joke in the family of like, "Hey, if you need a new car, just let Sarah drive yours because she'll total it and walk away, and then you can get a new car."
That's hilarious. You ever thought about playing the lotto? I mean, just
I
with
know,
all
right?
the luck? What do you take from all that out of your life? I mean, like, what has that taught you?
I think that it taught me what I write in the book, because
Mhm,
the book title is Dead Serious: How Death Made Me Laugh at Life.
mhm,
So every chapter is kind of like how death was prominent, either with me almost dying or with important people in my life dying and that impacting our family structure and stuff. In every chapter, I kind of reflect and was like, where is the humor here? Or where is the lesson here? Or was it actually like haha laughing? Or was it more of like mimicry? Or, I'm laughing in the face of death, or I'm laughing with this, or life is laughing at me and mocking me. And, it's all these
mhm,
kind of complicated relationships. But I feel like in the beginning, it taught me different things than it has taught me now. And I can reflect in different ways because I'm a different person. I'm more mature, more emotionally intelligent, all those things. And when I was young, I feel like those near death times, or the times where I had brushes with death, I feel like it made me feel like a rebel and this person who like is so lucky, or the cat with nine lives. Like I can't be killed, I can't be maimed, like I'm gonna be fine no matter what I do. And it gave me almost like a false sense of confidence and security in terms of like I can do anything and I'll survive and I'll be okay. And it was almost to the point where I was testing it, and I was trying to see how much I could get away with, whether that was, like, with my lifestyle or my actions or whatever, and I feel like that was the wrong way to interpret it, right? It was okay that I did that, I'm not mad at myself, that's just, like, who I was in those moments, but now that I'm a little bit more mature when I look back on it, I feel like what I was trying to do earlier was live this, like, rock and roll lifestyle of, like, live fast, die young, right? Like, I'm gonna leave no stone unturned, I'm just gonna do the damn thing, and, like, if I die tomorrow, I die tomorrow, and I had that kind of attitude, and maybe it's because I'm now engaged. I have a wonderful fiance. We've been together for 6 years. My life outlook, my mindset is different, that I no longer feel like I can have a short life, but it'll be a full life. Now
mhm.
I want to have a long life. And like just like you were talking about earlier about how people have to take care of each other, to take care of ourselves, to live long, healthy lives, I needed to think differently about my interaction with death and my like flirtations with death, about like maybe we don't test it anymore. Maybe
Yeah,
we don't like
yeah.
tempt fate and like drive fast and do these things because, my life is more precious and I might not have 9 lives.
With what you've been through, with all the brushes with death, it probably gives you a better appreciation than most people. You're like, "You know what? I've almost, bit the big one 6 times or whatever it's been."
I mean, I think it's really funny that the book ended up being about death just
Mhm,
as a general topic, because I had an experience with writing before.
mhm,
I was able to be in an anthology. So there was actually a book that had 15 authors. There were 15 of us women. And originally, it wasn't even a thing that I wanted to do. I was trying to get my mom into it
mhm,
because my mom wanted to write a book. And I said, well, I heard about this opportunity where you can just write a chapter. And what better entryway into you writing a whole book
mhm,
is to just write a chapter and see how it goes. Well, my mom's not all that tech savvy. And so when they told her that there would be these like Zoom calls and there would be these, different times to meet up, I told her, "Well, I'll do it with you," because this was all pre-pandemic, all before
Mhm,
like that
mhm,
just became commonplace that we all know how to video chat and do this stuff. And so I told her, "I'll do it with you, like, it's okay, I'll be right there with you." Meaning, I'll help you and be, like, your tech coach.
right, yeah,
And the organizers, the people who were writing the book and making it happen, they just saw the cash cow. That was a 2 for 1, right?
mhm,
Well, if we get the mom, then we can get the daughter, and then because it's a book where it's all these women, like, it's so perfect, and it worked. The angle worked. Like, I was like,
mhm,
"Okay, I'll do it too. I'll write a chapter too." But the whole prompt, the book was called Wisdom Before Me, and the prompt was to look at a version of yourself 10 years younger and give advice or like reflect on what you'd learned. But I was only like 32 at the time when all this stuff was happening. Maybe less, maybe I was like 31. But that's only reflecting back to 21 of like, that's a lot of growth, that's a lot of change, whether it's just identity or how you present yourself or your career. Like, there's just a lot of changes that happen between those years. And for me, it also included becoming sober. And so it was just an interesting way to get the juices flowing and get that kind of started, and then I knew I had a book in me, like, not with those people because
of
it was
course,
a really bad experience with, like, their editing and that process, but I'm like, "I think someday I am gonna write a book." But then you have all that, like, imposter syndrome and what am I gonna write about and what
mhm,
lessons would I really impart, and my fiancé is precious and practical, and he was like, "Isn't book writing like that for successful people?" Like, people He's like,
thanks,
they've
dude,
gone off and they've like I know, I was like, "I love you too, man." But he was like, he's thinking of like the Steve Jobs and the Bill Gates, like the people who've
yeah,
like, Oprah, where it's like you've had this rich life literally where you've made all this money and done all this stuff and you're like, "Here's the secret to success," or "Here's how I did it," or my reflection on it. And so I was like, "Okay, fair point." Like I don't necessarily have like the key that's gonna unlock and like help everyone be the best person. But
mhm,
when I started looking at themes in my life and things that have been constant influences,
mhm,
for better or worse, it was death. And that again, the book starts not with one of my near misses with death, but my book actually starts with the death of my maternal grandparents, how
mm,
both of my mom's parents died, because I grew up without them as grandparents. So they never lived long enough to get that grandparent moniker. They
mhm,
died. My mom's mom passed away when my mom was 10, and then her dad passed away right before they got married. So I just didn't have I only had 1 grandma and grandpa, and they were from my dad. And so I actually start the book by saying, "These are deaths that happened before I was even a blip or a thought in my parents' mind, before they were even married, and these deaths were so impactful that they impacted how we talked about death." One of them, my grandma's death, my grandma took her own life. And so
mhm,
one of them, just even basing around the shame around suicide and like how we talk about suicide and how prevalent suicide is in our community, but the amount of shame that's related to saying that. And so for years and years and years until we were old enough, my parents said my grandma died of a heart attack. And then we started like poking holes in that, and we're like, "Well, grandpa died of a heart attack, and we have all these details about how he died, but y'all just say she died of a heart attack, and then you don't say anything else, like, we're finding this a little suspicious." And
mhm,
then when we actually asked, it's because they couldn't make up a whole other story because she actually, took her own life. And so then you get the real story and it just shows, the shame around it, how you build narratives around it, how you don't share the uncomfortable things. And that's also very Midwestern, right? That's
mhm,
also very typical in Midwestern families to be polite and not bring up uncouth topics and stuff. But how does that morph into, well, then I'm not comfortable bringing this up with you. And then I'm not comfortable sharing this with you. And there's kind of these threads of commonality that weave in of secrecy and shame and on top of things like grief that you're still working through. And then how do you work through grief if you can't even talk about what happened? So, I think that that's just been really impactful. So I'm grateful that I was able to share so many of these stories because they are difficult. Another story that ends up in the book is my cousin was murdered in Wisconsin and it's still a cold case. Like yeah, I know, right? It's like you don't want to say it's cool that all these stories, but it's also like it's bizarre, but it's like, and so I actually hope that putting her story in the book would add some visibility to it. And if, we get some more eyes on it, maybe and they've been on podcasts and cold case and unsolved mystery things. It's like maybe somebody would know something and hearing this story in another way, in a different light, would maybe give my family some closure.
yeah,
They've done a lot. They've done documentaries.
uh-huh.
They've
Well,
really promoted her story to try and find answers. Yeah.
okay, you and I are very similar in a lot of ways, minus the dying thing. My brother was murdered in '99.
Oh, wow.
He had just gotten out of prison, he had done 10 years for, Grand Theft Auto and a couple other things. and he had gone to a bar, yet again, alcohol, and he was playing pool, and he bumped into the guy's girlfriend that he was playing pool with, and the guy unscrewed the bottom of the pool stick and proceeded to beat him in the face. Now, so it cracked his orbital socket and all this other shit. Now, where it gets a little fuzzy because I don't know exactly what happened, he went to the hospital, he left AMA against medical advice, and then went home and died. So, but the guy eventually turned himself in. He got a bunch of years for manslaughter, which, because I guess they couldn't prove, walking around a bar for 5 seconds, because somebody was trying to get him on premeditated. And I'm like, that's kind of stupid, because it was reactionary and dumb. Don't get me wrong. I wasn't close with Paul at all. I have very bad memories of him because of alcohol. He actually stole my mom's car when I was a kid, like not like 10 or 11 years old. Had all what little Christmas presents I had, they were in that car. Urinated all over the seat, typical alcoholic
God.
behavior. So, I mean, but he still was my half brother, and he still got taken. I was blessed enough to have the closure of it. So I kind of feel bad for your family that they don't, you know what I mean? I hate when stuff like that goes unsolved and you don't ever know,
Well, that's where I think the frustration, and hers
Mm.
was really graphic. Not that yours, I mean,
Yeah, no,
being beaten to death is like super terrible too, but I think what's most jarring about her story, she was 19 years old. She was
mhm,
working at a local
yeah,
Arby's. She was just, working late night shifts at a local Arby's in Wisconsin. And someone came in the middle of the night and shot her in the face in her bed with a shotgun, and that's it. I guess her mom, Tammy, actually came out into the hallway and confronted the person, but she thought they were being burgled. She didn't it hadn't processed that it was a gunshot. She just thought like, "Oh my god, there was a crash or something." Like it didn't process because there was so much adrenaline of there's an intruder in my house. So she actually came out of her bedroom, confronted the person ish, not enough to like get a good detail of like
right,
who they were, like what was happening, because she thought she was just like get out or whatever. And so we don't know, was it mistaken identity? Did they have the wrong house? Was she actually the target when there's not like a note or a this? It didn't feel like a crime of passion or whatever. It's like maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, and it could very easily have been wrong place, wrong time. And
right,
that's what's the most gutting about it, is that there is not closure, where if we could actually pinpoint, oh, it was an ex, or it was a jaded lover of somebody who wanted her and it was unrequited love, or, like if there was more of a lead, then I feel like they would have even that hint of more closure. But I mean, they've had billboards in the Milwaukee area. They've put up,
wow,
they've had rewards posted of like rewards for information. They did a documentary. They had a screening at a movie theater for the documentary called Letters to Ashley. And like I said, they've been on all these like cold case and murder mystery podcasts and stuff, which is kind of good that the genre has such popularity right now, that there's so many people kind of pouring over it, because you never know who could bust open and solve a cold
right,
case. Like, we're here for it, but I feel like just like every other story in the book, each each one of these deaths, it might not, when I say like death makes me laugh at life, it's not like I'm gonna look at it and laugh in a patronizing way and be like, ha
mhm,
ha ha, or like, we're so glad this person's gone. But it's more of like, how do we find the lightness and how do we find the levity? And when I look at her mom, and the brightness of a person that she is in spite of this horrible tragic thing that's happened to her,
mhm,
and ironically their last name is Love, so
mm,
it's Ashley Love and Tammy Love. And so I feel like there's such a beautiful metaphor in here about like still having love despite the loss, and the way that Tammy just continues to advocate for her forever 19-year-old daughter. Like there's so much beauty in that, that it doesn't have to be good for there to be beauty and lightness and hope.
that's a good outlook because sometimes you can get the light out of the dark, and the people that can do that are special people. It takes a lot. I'm asking this question in closing of everybody that comes on my show. You've been through a lot, obviously, and what are 2 things that you live by that are, like, core values of you?
Ooh, I like that. As I'm, like, looking up, I've got my little vision board up here.
Mhm,
Am I taking anything from that?
mhm,
I think that that one word that really jumps into my mind that has changed in definition a lot over the years, just as, like, a core tenet and value, is strength.
mhm,
But I feel like the word strength sometimes, again, can mean different things in different chapters or eras of your life, right? Because when I was young, strength meant be a fighter. It
mhm.
meant be aggressive. It meant be outwardly and like demonstrate your strength. And I feel like now what I'm learning with, my age and maturity and emotional intelligence and all that stuff, is that strength doesn't have to be outward to be strength. Strength can be inward. And my sobriety has shown me what inner strength can be.
Mm,
And the conviction of having boundaries can show me what strength is and what it can feel like. And I feel like the way that strength is balanced and kind of what keeps it in check, my other probably core value and tenet is just be kind. Because I feel like be kind can also be a very ambiguous phrase, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that I have to give to everybody, and be kind means be a pushover, but it also means remembering to be kind to myself and going back to those boundaries and saying, a good example is recently I've had to put different levels of contact boundaries with a family member, right? So sometimes people try and go no contact or they go low contact or there's just essential contact and things like that. And I feel like it was always this struggle of me internally saying, I don't want to talk to them at all. I wanted no contact, but that wasn't possible because of the family dynamic and the way that this person's connected to me. It was just a little bit too challenging to go full no contact, that trying to walk on eggshells or do that kind of mental gymnastics of trying to actually have no contact was causing more issues. That the way that I was kind and strong in referring to this is, it's not like, let's say they send me an email, right? It's not that I'm not going to respond, because that's the easy, almost kind of like chicken shit way out, right?
Yeah,
It's like,
right.
I'm just not going to respond. But what the stronger and probably more kind to myself response is, what should my response to this be? Because it makes you take accountability of it for yourself, and it makes you say, which version of me is showing up to respond here? Am I going to be petty and I'm going to be like, come back passive aggressive and be like, "Meh," or am I going to come back and just like, maybe I don't respond right away, maybe I wait 3 days and then I have a short but respectful response, and then they learn that I'm not going to respond really quickly and they're not going to like get the answer they think they want that's all flowery and whatever. That's the way that I'm choosing to respond to it. So I feel like that's given me a little bit more power than I thought that I could have. But
mhm.
yeah, I feel like strength and be kind are like core tenets.
Nice. And then the other one is you're old, you have grandkids or whatever you want, and you're about to shove off the mortal coil. What do you want people to remember you as?
Wow, legacy is such a beautiful thing to think about, right?
Mhm,
Because especially with my book being all about like you could die at any time, people
mhm.
were like, "Why are you writing this so early?" Like I'm 35. I'm
Right.
about to be 36 this year. And they're like, "Aren't memoirs for people who are like 50s, 60s, 90s, whatever like you're talking about to shove off?"
Mhm.
And I just kind of felt like I'm not promised that much time. Like I could say, "Let's wait until I'm old to write this," but why put off?
Yeah.
And why not just do it now? And so I feel like if I live long enough to have a sequel, I
Mhm.
have another memoir that maybe is like the next 30 to 60 years that I can reflect on, that's cool, and I would be grateful for that. But I feel like in terms of, if I even if I die tomorrow, I got hit by a bus, the way I'd want people to remember me is that I was brave enough to be an inspiration. Because I feel like a lot of people either think so little of themselves that they're like, who could ever take inspiration from what I'm doing? Or they're just too scared. And I really hope, because my book is kinda cringe, like, it's a lot of, like, talking about me and things that I did and, like, how I wasn't the best person, and so
Mhm.
it's not like a cookbook or a fun, romantic novel or anything. It's just, like, it's kinda cringe, it's not for everybody, that's okay, but I hope that when people read it, if they resonate with some of the stories, or like you were saying, of like, "Man, we've had a lot of similar experiences in a weird way," I hope that helps people who are dealing with themes of shame and grief, that it helps them work through some of that stuff. Like, I'm not a therapist, but I hope they look at it and they feel less alone.
Yeah. Well, that's good. So where can people find you if they want to get your book when it comes out and all that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this name down here, and I'm sure it's going to be in the show notes and all that great stuff. Sarah Marie Shoulak is my name on everything. So that'll be the website, sarahmarieshoulak.com. It's also Sarah Marie Shoulak at Gmail is the email. And then on Instagram and Substack, that's the handle. So you can just put that full name in, and you'll find me everywhere.
Well, I want to take time to say thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. And everybody knows that they can find me I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and you can watch the show on YouTube and Spotify. Thanks for watching, everybody.